we wanted to let you know that the meeting recording will take place. Same goes for those of you, especially our faculty and staff, students as well, who may have to leave to attend a class. You can feel free to do that, and you can pick up anything you've missed in the session recording. The other thing to note, as many of you have discovered, is as participants in this particular webinar, you don't have access to your cameras and audio. That said, we definitely welcome your questions and your thoughts, and we invite you to share those through our chat. So we have a CAE team member who's monitoring the chat, and they will be sure to bring your questions to our attention during our question periods. So before we begin today's session, I want to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and acknowledging reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous peoples. Given that we are in the days leading up to the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation on September 30th, I just want to acknowledge that it's exceptionally important for all of us as individuals to take time to learn the truth and reflect on the immense historic and ongoing harms of colonialism, assimilation, and the residential school system on Indigenous peoples. It's also important to acknowledge the incredible leadership and resilience of Indigenous peoples and communities. So these are the sites that I've found particularly valuable to my own learning in the lead up to the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, and hopefully they might be helpful to some of you as well. So before I get into the aims specifically of our Learning Management System Review Town Hall, I did want to take a second to turn things over to our Vice President Academic, Fiona Allen, for a few words about the importance of this particular initiative. Fiona, have you been able to join us?
I think, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I'm a bunch of us were in another meeting, so I think everyone is jumping over now. And I just have to point out that Frank Bieri did notice that in the room I'm in, there is an overhead projector. And so, of course, as we embark on our LMS review, it's important that we provide updated tools for our team to use for both our students and our faculty. And this is a chance for everyone to have input into a process that is new to the college. We've not done this before, a broad survey of our needs and what we need. The LMS is critical. We can't deliver our programs without it. So we really need your input. We really need you to take a look at what's out there. And after the pandemic, we've had a unique experience where we all took everything online. So we all have more insights now into how we use this tool, how we can use this tool. And some of the things maybe you tried to do during the pandemic that you thought, I wish I could do this. So this is our chance to have these conversations and talk about what kind of foundational tool we need for our program and course delivery. And this is one opportunity for the town hall, but you will have many more opportunities to give input and have these conversations throughout the next few months. Natasha and Jen are going to give you some information about the process and where you can have input. And it's really important that as we move into looking at our learning platforms, that we give consideration to all of the things that affect us every day. Accessibility, it's important that it's user-friendly, and it's very important that it's flexible. We're seeing more demands for flexibility in learning. So I want to just say thank you to everyone for attending today. And Natasha, I just had a faculty member ask me if we were recording it, so that's great that we are. And I'm going to turn it over to you. I will say, everyone, I do have to leave the call between 2:30 and 2:45. Our minister is coming to visit today. Jill Dunlop, the Minister of Colleges and Universities, is coming on campus, and we are going to take her for a tour. So I will be jumping off the call a little bit early, but I wish you all good conversation today.
Thanks so much, Fiona. All right, so in terms of today's meeting, our hopes are to share with you some of the rationale for reviewing our digital learning needs at this time and selecting an updated learning management system. We have the benefit of being joined by two guests, Phil Hill and Jeanette Wiseman, who will introduce themselves in just a little bit from MindWires Consulting. They're assisting us through this process, and they're going to talk to us about the contemporary landscape of the learning management system market and vendors. We are also going to share with you some of the key phases of our review and highlight all of the ways that you can engage with us and share your ideas and get involved. And then we're going to have a couple of periods to answer your specific questions as well. So in terms of an agenda, so you can see where we're going for today's meeting, we're going to begin with Jen Martin telling you a little bit about why we're looking at upgrading our learning management system at Niagara College. We'll do that market scan with Phil. There's going to be a dedicated time for some questions around the market information that Phil shares with you. And then I'll be back to talk about the phases of our review at the college and the ways that you can get involved. And then there'll be another question period should you have any questions about process or engagement, okay? Again, the session's being recorded and the recording is going to be made available on our website. If you haven't been there already, I will toss the link into the chat in just a second. And that's a QR code. Should you have your mobile device, you can take a photo and it should take you right to our LMS website where you can keep up to date on any announcements, as well as the sort of teams that are overseeing this process and any updates that are coming out of the review itself. Jen, I'll hand things over to you.
Thanks, Natasha, and thank you everyone for being here today. It is lovely to see so many people out and taking an interest in this process. So we thought we would start out today with a little bit of background on sort of the position of the LMS at the college and why we are doing this LMS review now. So by way of a little bit of background, Niagara College does currently use Blackboard Learn Original as its learning management system. And that original part is important, and we'll get to that in just a minute as well. But if you spent any time at the college, you are probably familiar with the fact that our LMS is used for communication, it's used for content sharing, it's used for assessment, and it's used for community building. And it touches all different areas of the college in so many different ways. So it's a really foundational and a really important system. Now, our version of Blackboard has actually been in use at Niagara College since 2003. So if you've been here for a while, you may be very well aware of how long that system has been in use for. Now, over that period of time, we have actually never engaged in a learning management system review. So this is a fairly new thing for us, but a really important one as we start to look forward to where we're going and how we're going to do that. And one of the things that has prompted this conversation is the fact that our current Blackboard contract ends in May of 2024. So understanding that and knowing that the contract is coming to an end, we did decide that now was sort of the optimal time to really start to look at an updated LMS. So some of that does have to do with coming out of the pandemic and really looking at how student needs and preferences are changing. And we're hearing a lot about students, as Fiona mentioned, really wanting flexibility and choice. We're looking at different delivery models. And we're also looking at things like different timing of learning and location of learning. So students are looking for a lot of different things right now, and it's really important to us that we be able to support that. Alongside that, we're really looking for a very modern, accessible platform that does support different delivery modes. So we've seen a lot of innovation and a lot of potential across the last 2 years in terms of what people are already doing and the things that they want to do. So we want to capitalize on that as much as possible to really make use of the interest in different delivery modes and to really support good innovative teaching and learning. Alongside that, we're also looking at options to really look at how the LMS can be used outside of traditional academic programming. So a lot of our LMS use right now is in courses, and also some homerooms and some organizations. But there are options there for things like the kind of contract training that International does. There are options for student services, some who already use Blackboard, to make even more use of an LMS going forward. We're looking at other areas of the college, like communication, that don't really currently use the LMS, but might have some interesting ways to make use of it. So those are all really important things to us. Alongside that, we're also really aware that Blackboard Learn Original has reduced its updates and supports over the last couple of years. And that is largely because they are focusing on Blackboard Learn Ultra, which is a newer program, and also a different program. So despite the fact that it's still Blackboard, and we may very well find that we are with a Blackboard system in the future, Ultra is a very different program, and the amount of change management that will be required to switch to that, even if we did make that transition, is significant. So if we're going to spend that time and that energy going forward, we want to make sure that we are really assessing the needs of the college and really figuring out which program is going to meet those needs best. And alongside that, and we will pass this over to Phil and Jeanette in just a minute to talk more with you about market share. But we are aware that Blackboard has experienced some loss of market share, and we are deeply committed to finding a program that is going to have some longevity attached to it. If we are going to make this switch, it's important to us that it be robust and lasting. So as part of this process, we do have a number of guiding principles that we are very much committed to. We are, as you've probably picked up on already, future focused. We really want to look at something that is going to take Niagara into the future and to do so in a really good way. We want, as we go through this process, to be as transparent as possible. You can access our website where we have a lot of different information on what's going on and how we're doing that. We are, of course, always happy to answer questions and any concerns that you might have as we go through this. We very much want community input engagement, which is part of the reason why we are here today. So we will be reaching out to you. We will be talking later in the presentation about opportunities to get involved. But we are really focused on user needs and user experience, and we want to hear from you across the college about the things that you have experienced and also the things that you are hoping for or wishing for in a learning management system. And on top of that, we want this to be accessible and inclusive. And we certainly mean that in terms of whatever system we choose. We really want to affirm and value and support diverse learners, but we want that to be a part of this process as well. So we want to hear from all kinds of people across the college and really hope that you will be participating as we go through and as we start to collect some of this information. So to ensure that we are adhering to those guiding principles, we do have a number of people who are working on review oversight. Our project sponsor is our Vice President Academic, Fiona Allen, who you just heard from. Our project co-chairs are Natasha Hannon and myself. So you've also heard from both of us, and we are always happy to hear from you if you've got thoughts or concerns. We are working with consultants from Mindwires Consulting, Jeanette Wiseman and Phil Hill, who are both on the call and will be speaking to you in just a minute. And then we also have a range of people from across the college. So the steering team for the LMS review is primarily made up of ITS and Center for Academic Excellence representatives. We have an advisory team where we have a number of faculty and students, along with associate deans and some representatives from our communications department, from health, wellness, and accessibility, from the Library and Learning Commons, some additional Center for Academic Excellence representatives, and representatives from International as well, to make sure that we have a lot of different perspectives informing the process. And we are also getting institutional contributors who are coming to us from planning and institutional research as we develop surveys, from finance as we figure out procurement, from communications. All of those messages you've been getting have been coming from communications. We're working with the registrar to ensure that all of our systems align properly, with marketing to build our website, and with international and student services to make sure that we are working with a diverse group of people across the college. And that QR code there, if you would like to scan it, will take you to some more information on that oversight piece. So, as we go through this process, we do have a fair number of activities planned. As of right now, in fall of 2022, we are focusing on identifying our stakeholder. That's all of you, needs and priorities. So we are going to be reaching out about surveys and focus groups and all kinds of opportunities to get involved and tell us what you are looking for. Out of that, we are going to develop our request for proposal requirements, and the request for proposal will go out to market with all of those needs represented in it. We are expecting that the request for proposal will go out in winter of 2023, quite early, probably in January. We will be accepting vendor proposals who are interested in showing us what they can do. Out of that, we will implement some sandboxes so that we can actually kick the tires on some of the possible learning management systems and do some evaluation of what's going to meet our needs. And ultimately, by the end of the winter, we are going to actually make our selection. And once we've done that, coming into spring of 2023, we will negotiate our contract with the learning management system that we choose, and we will actually begin that transition process, which we anticipate will take approximately another year to accomplish. So if you are sort of thinking, what does the learning management system market look like right now? When we do go out to market, we are not expecting a huge number of vendors to be able to support the needs of the college. We are expecting at most probably the 5 that you see represented on the screen here: Canvas, Moodle, Sakai, Brightspace, and Blackboard Learn Ultra, although we may get somewhat fewer than that. So while this is a big and extensive and robust process, there are also only so many learning management systems that we would expect to respond. Now, that said, we do have some lovely people here who know far more about the learning management system market than we do. So at this point, we are going to pass things over to Phil and Jeanette from Mindwires Consulting to introduce themselves and to talk a little bit about what the LMS industry and market looks like at this point in time.
Thank you, Jen and Natasha, and it's great to talk to everyone. My name is Phil Hill with Mindwires, and looking at Wayne's history, I also have been working in EdTech for about 2 decades. It's sort of scary when you start counting things in decades, but basically we here at Mindwires, we help schools make effective decisions around technology that impacts teaching and learning. That's what we do. So our role here is to help educate you on the market conditions, but also facilitate the process. So with that in mind, I'd like to also introduce you to my colleague, Jeanette Wiseman, who you guys will get to know quite well during the needs assessment. Jeanette?
Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you all. So been in educational technology for 2 decades, which Wayne and Phil, I guess, we're in good company. But looking forward to talking to all of you.
Yeah, well, thank you. So of course, the focus, as we're all talking about, is future focus, and it's really about Niagara College. What are you guys trying to solve? What are your pain points, and how can a system help improve your learning usage across the system? That is the real driver of the process. But at the same time, you can't make this decision in a vacuum. And as Jen was just sharing, it's good to know what the market looks like, how many vendors are likely to be able to meet your requirements, and to get some understanding of what the big trends are within the LMS market. So we'd like to present that here really as a way to augment the real focus on your needs moving forward. So LMS, just so we're using consistent language, we look at an LMS as it's got a lot of key feature sets, such as keeping track of a roster for a course, reporting grades, discussion forums, providing video, quizzes and assessments, sharing course materials, additional topics in the calendar, and assignments. What's really 2 things we'd like to highlight is that, and this gets to where Fiona was talking about this is a critical tool. Well, part of the reason is the LMS ends up being the user navigation in most educational contexts. So it actually is the user experience of interacting virtually within a classroom setting. And part of that comes from, like we're showing with video platforms, quizzes, and assessments, but there are other examples as well. And we'll go into more detail in a little bit. A lot of times you'll have third-party tools that are actually doing these functions, but quite often they get integrated in and presented within the LMS itself. So the LMS is the learning platform that most holistically represents how teachers, but more importantly, how students experience your college in a virtual setting. And these are some of the key features of the system. Now, one way we like to look at the LMS market. This graphic I started producing in 2008, and it keeps getting updated. But what this shows is the LMS market share within US and Canada for higher education. And the thickness of each band represents what percentage of schools have chosen a specific LMS as their primary LMS over time. And so if you look at the time axis on the bottom, it goes from the very beginning of the market to where we are today. This was at the year-end 2021 report that we put out that you guys have access to. So if you look at this, we wanted people to see the big picture of the LMS market to enable them to make better decisions. A couple things I will highlight from this, but there's going to be more details within the report. One is on the left, you'll notice that for most of the market, they were created from projects at specific colleges and universities. So Blackboard itself came out of a project from Cornell. Prometheus came out of George Washington University. D2L came out of University of Guelph. And so most of the systems, the market originated as, let's build something for our school, and then, hey, we ought to commercialize this and sell this to others because other schools might want it. So this is a market that really developed into a commercial market, even though a lot of the systems weren't designed that way. The other thing is, take a look at the right, and this sort of gets to the point that Jen was making. We're not talking about a market that has dozens and dozens of solutions that you can choose from, and that therefore you can just really match detailed features with detailed implementations. If you look at systems that have been the primary system for a school of, say, 10,000 students or greater, and that which systems have demonstrated they can do it, you're talking about Canvas, Sakai, Moodle, Blackboard, D2L, Brightspace. And just to clarify from the point, the D2L is the company, Brightspace is the product. And there's a couple of others that are worth looking at. Schoology is a system that came out of the K-12 market. They dabbled in higher ed and they have a few clients, but it's not their primary market. Learning Studio, that's what used to be known as eCollege, and Pearson bought it, but that's actually gone end of life. That's what the EOL means. Homegrown, a lot of schools used to talk about building their own LMS, although you can see from the graphic that's mostly gone away. And there are some other systems. But then two other things I'd like to highlight. Within, by the way, there is a question about, are we going to talk about third-party tools? Question's already being answered. The answer is yes, but thank you, Natasha. The left side of the graphic, for the first decade and a half of the market, so much of this market was dominated by Blackboard, the large gray area in the center, and other companies' reactions to Blackboard. So it wasn't just that Blackboard was the system with the greatest market share, but a lot of it was how they did it and how that caused the other vendors to react. Their growth strategy was largely based on mergers and acquisitions. They acquired their competitors and consolidated the customers into a larger company. The largest of these was when they acquired WebCT, but they also acquired Angel. And as they did this, one thing that happened was the rise of the open source movement, which is sort of at the top. Moodle in particular rose as an alternative, and one of the biggest drivers, particularly in North America, was for people to say, I don't want my system to be acquired by Blackboard. I want to control my future. And open source had a real answer to that, saying you can control your destiny. It's open source. You can do what you want. So for the first half of this market, it really was driven by Blackboard and reactions to Blackboard. There are some also issues such as desire to learn, which became D2L, and there was a large patent lawsuit, but that's getting into a little bit of details. The big change in the market came with the introduction of Canvas, really around 2010 and 11. And Canvas, the company is in structure, Canvas is a product. It was the first academic LMS that was native to the cloud. It was designed from day one to be delivered in the cloud with AWS. And it was designed from day one, not as a university or college project, but as a system for a commercial market to be sold to others. And they quickly took hold and started growing. And to this day, it's the fastest growing system, and it's the largest system in terms of market share in North America. The second half of this market, you could characterize it as driven by Canvas or other other companies' reaction to Canvas. And what I'd like to dive a little bit into that second part, reaction to Canvas. Canvas was successful, and if you wanted to summarize it, it was born in the cloud. So it was scalable, it was reliable. It didn't go down the first week of class or during exams, and it was very predictable and resilient. It was very intuitive, easy to understand, to the point, non-cluttered interface, and so people didn't feel that you had to do a lot of training. You would get more faculty saying, I get it, I can figure the system out, let's go with it. And then it had some other key features, but that usability and that cloud basis are key, because given their success, that has helped drive the market to react on those two fronts. So for example, Blackboard is also shifting to the cloud, and by the end of next year, in 15 months, they will have all of their LMS usage in the cloud. D2L has already completely migrated to the cloud, and it's a cloud-based system at this point. On the intuitive design, and this is critical for you guys, Blackboard, when you hear Learn Ultra, that presents a new user experience, and it is explicitly designed to be less cluttered and more intuitive. And a lot of that was their reaction to Canvas and what was happening in the market. D2L Brightspace has also completely revamped their product line on its usability and intuitive design. So none of this is to argue, make your selection based on who's the most popular, et cetera, but it's critical to understand the nature of the market and the big trends, particularly around cloud and intuitive design. And yes, I see some comments about the market. We're talking mostly higher ed. K-12 is related, but we're focusing on your context at this point. Let's look a little bit more on Blackboard, particularly around terminology, which is a little bit tricky. With Blackboard, they have Blackboard Learn. That's our LMS solution. Now, with the user experience, the way the product is presented to users, the features, the website, the mobile that you use, you have the original experience. That's what you guys are on, Blackboard Learn Original. Learn Ultra is a new product experience, a new LMS design that is Blackboard's future. And I will say a note, even though they don't have an end of life for Original, they've made all of their presentations to investors and to the market that's the direction they're going. They are moving everything to Ultra. They just haven't figured out when they're going to get everybody off of Original. The point is, since you guys are looking for a long-term partner, staying on Learn Original is not really a viable solution. That's part of the reason for this evaluation. Ultra is the direction you're going. Now, within those, there are different deployment models that they have presented. Blackboard used to be mostly self-hosted. That means that it was the data center was on your college campus. Managed hosted is when they introduced a solution where Blackboard had their own data centers and they managed it. And then SaaS, you'll hear it called Learn SaaS. That's software as a service. That means in the cloud. That means Amazon Web Services. What's crucial here is, as I just said, Blackboard by the end of next year will be completely in the cloud, in the SaaS area. The other thing is Ultra is only available in the cloud or in SaaS. So Blackboard has had a challenging place to define all of these terms, but we wanted to lay these out the way they've presented it. We're looking for the future at Blackboard Learn Ultra in the cloud. That is the direction they're going. Now, just to complicate matters a little bit, but I don't think this is as important for your school, they do have, you can have base navigation for Ultra, which is the landing page before you jump into specific courses. But much more important is the course view, where it actually changes within a course which features you have and how it moves forward. So Blackboard, there's some terminology that's important to understand. And we are looking in this process, the evaluation is of Learn Ultra. Now, just to give a little bit broader picture about market share, this shows numerically the percentage of schools who are on each system over time. And this is North American higher ed. And you see Blackboard, WebCT. This one, obviously, since Blackboard bought WebCT, it increased the company's market share over time. You see the rise of Moodle in the middle with the yellow, where Moodle really started to grow in the late 2000s, but then they've sort of tailed off and plateaued a little bit, but they are the second most commonly used system now. Canvas is the fastest growing system, although its growth has slowed somewhat in the past year or two. And then you have D2L Brightspace, which is sort of the slow and steady. They've been here for 2 decades plus, and they've continued to grow, and they are growing. But those are from a market share perspective. This a quick question: who provides tech support for open source? Either, well, a lot of times it's a school, at least in the old days. But there are also companies who will host and provide tech support for open source systems such as Moodle. We can get into that in more detail later. So you have a choice of doing it yourself or paying a company to do the open source support. Since North America is not everything, I want to give a quick view of the international market. So if you look at the rest of the world in higher education, the market share, one thing you'll notice is it's a Moodle world. Moodle dominates globally. It's the most used academic LMS in the world by far. And to their credit, part of that is because of their business model and their open source nature, they actually created e-learning markets in a lot of countries that quite honestly couldn't have developed this infrastructure without a free open source alternative. Blackboard historically was quite strong international markets. They've obviously dropped off, but that was one of the company's strengths. And then you see some of the others. This is another view looking at today at market share by region. And one thing to point out is if you look at these different global regions, North America is somewhat of an outlier. We have different dynamics. Moodle is not dominant the way it is in other global regions. And you see, for example, about Canvas is the market share we showed before. Canvas is the most used system. But this also captures some of the other, when you look at others, who are some of the other systems? Ilias is used in Europe, particularly in Germany. Camillo is used in Latin America and a little bit in Europe. And so there are a few other companies who have done LMS stuff. But over time, what's interesting is the market is consolidating. the markets are starting to look more and more like each other. So the market in Europe now looks a lot more like the North American market than it did 5 to 10 years ago. And not only that, they're sort of becoming more and more concentrated on what we call the big four vendors. So this is not just looking at the percentage of schools. This is looking at the scaling that by enrollment to get a rough measure of the number of students on each system. And in North America, what you'll notice is that over time, Canvas, Blackboard, D2L, and Moodle combined are now up around 95, 96% usage within North America. For better or worse, this is a market that's becoming somewhat of an oligopoly. And it's very difficult for new systems to enter the market. So that's part of the reason you won't hear, hey, what about this new system that's funded by venture capital? It's just a very difficult market entry that over time has become much more concentrated among these key players. Now, we have additional data, but just to give you a sense of, well, if you say, well, when schools leave one system, what do they move to? So if we just look at the 3 years, 2019 through 21, and the left side of this chart shows from, like we used to be a Blackboard school, now most of those have gone to Canvas, secondarily to D2L Brightspace. The system that's lost the most clients other than Blackboard is Moodle, and you can see where they've moved. But so we have a lot of data that as we go through this, if people have questions of, hey, within this geographic region, when schools leave product X, who do they go to? And see if that's relevant for your decision making. Let's talk a little bit about the third party situation. If you look at the LMS market from a large trend perspective, back in the beginning, the LMS market had a walled garden approach. So let's give you what we think is safe for you to, work with as a learning platform. Do it in a safe environment. That's where the walls come up. And part of that is for secure. There are some legitimate reasons, security, et cetera. And so these big tools, the gradebook, syllabus, course content, et cetera, were all provided within the system. Now, over time, things started rising up that people would say, hey, I could actually use this within my classroom. And so, for example, social networks came up in the mid-2000s, and then blogs. Google Blogger was one of the big ones. Unfortunately, or part of the reason to understand the market, the initial reaction of the companies was to say, hey, we see that you want to have a social network and a blog. What we're going to do is we're going to give you a crappy version of those features within the LMS. So in the late 2000s, you started seeing this. And then it started to grow, though, because a lot of tools were relevant for learning platforms. And the LMSs kept trying to put crappier versions within their system. Of course, they didn't want it to be crappier, but it would be within there, and it didn't quite do the job. This is part of the reason we've ended up with very cluttered systems with too many choices and pull-down menus, and it's complicated to understand. And it's part of the reason that it's been very difficult to get intuitive, naturally designed systems. Well, the market has changed, and part of that is because of Canvas, but probably a bigger reason is because of standards from what used to be known as IMS Global. It's now known as One EdTech. It's a standards body for education. And they created the Learning Tools Interoperability, and it made it far easier for systems to say, hey, if you want to have a wiki, we will give you a way to directly access that wiki, but have it integrated within the LMS. And it's not going to be necessarily custom code. So systems became interoperable, and it was much easier to start stitching all of these tools together. We realize this is very important for LMS evaluation, such as you guys are going through. And so one of the things we'll have to look at in this is not just what specific features does an LMS provide, but what is your approach to enable the integration of third-party apps, and how easy is it to get those systems to work together, and how natural will it be for those systems to look cohesive, to give a consistent experience for the end user. But this has been a very good movement for the market. It's opened up the market. I will say that all of the vendors that we've talked about, particularly now that Learning Studio has gone end of life, but the ones that Jen mentioned, Canvas, D2L Brightspace, Blackboard Learn, Moodle, Sakai, all of those are very strong in supporting these interoperability standards and integrating in third-party tools. However, they do it in very different ways. So they have how easy it is to take in new features or new third-party apps, who gets to control that decision, how well it looks like it fits within a system. There are differences in their approach to this, but the new world is very much an ecosystem type of an approach. And all of the vendors are supportive of these standards. So the question for the evaluation is, well, show us how well you do this and how we can, what the experience will look like. So it's not just the LMS, but how the LMS interoperates with other tools that are that's going to be very important moving forward. And one final point to make that's sort of on a mega trend level, it comes down to adoption. So it's not just the technology itself, it's how schools are adopting technology. This comes from Everett Rogers, wrote Diffusion of Innovations, and part of the idea was you have different needs from different adopting types. So innovators and early adopters, those are schools that that might be saying, "Hey, I want part of the solution. If I don't have everything, fine, I'll figure out how to finish it." By the way, sorry for the Google Classroom focus in this version. Ignore where that is. Google Classroom only plays in the K-12 market. But the point of this is you have these customers want technology and performance, and they can figure out how to make it all work together. On the right, with the majority and even laggards, that's where you get people who want to have a much more consistent, safe experience. Hey, if I'm going to go with this system, just make it all work, make sure everything's there, and then I'll do it. Geoffrey Moore expanded this model to say there's really a chasm between these two sides of the market. You have these ed tech enthusiasts who want to try new things and are going to drive solutions. Then you have a large percentage of other people that want safety and security. The reason this is so important, and it ties back to the pandemic, is the adoption of the LMS has gone up over time, and it's getting deeper and deeper. But in particular, with the pandemic, where everybody was essentially thrown online, now almost all teachers and faculty have some experience with online tools. And so you've moved so much of the support onto the right side of this. You need to understand how people need to be supported. So one way we like to explain this is this chasm we just talked about. Schools no longer get to choose one side or the other of who do we support. They've got to support both sides of the chasm. So in this LMS evaluation process, it's important to understand we're going to have these ed tech enthusiasts on the left who want to, hey, give us some tools, let us innovate, we'll figure some things out, don't get in our way too much. But at the same time, we're going to have a lot of people, staff and faculty and students, who are going to say, okay, give me some guardrails, make this a safe environment, make sure it just works, don't make life difficult for me. So a lot of our evaluation process is going to make sure that we understand the needs of both sides of the chasm and that the decision making goes along with it. So when you hear us talking about stakeholder needs and being diverse, One of the ways we need to be diverse is to say we want to understand the power user, the ed tech enthusiast, but we also want to hear from faculty members who say, I don't use the LMS heavily, or I haven't used it a lot in the past. We want to hear your needs on both sides. We want to take into account both types of this. And this is very common within the market, but I just want to emphasize that's going to be a key part of what we're looking at. But with that in mind, happy to talk about other aspects of this. And so I think what we're going to do is see if there are questions that we can address on market trends or specific vendors and how it relates to your evaluation.
Thanks so much, Phil. I know we've been answering some questions in the chat as they came up. If there's anything else that you want to ask Phil, or if you feel like your question wasn't adequately addressed, feel free to just toss it right back up there in the chat. We'll give you a couple minutes and so we can take those questions.
Looks like there are several questions about open source as well. One thing I will point out with open source, on a trend basis, when Moodle and Sakai, they're both open source, when they both came around in the mid 2000s and up into 2010, 2011, it was pretty much the fact that they were open source was one of the main reasons why schools adopted those systems. So like the purpose was to be open source, to have control. Now, quite often the cost of that is it put a higher burden on the schools to do the support. Now that can be viewed as control. It's also additional resources, but so much was about open source itself and you do your own support with that. Over time, that's really shifted. The market at this point, for the most part, is looking much more on, I want to have an intuitive system that's well supported, integrates with others. And if it happens to be open source, that's great. And if that happens to give us a price advantage, that's great. But I want these other parts of the system. There was a point about data and security. It's a good point that they'll be reviewed. But yeah, all of these systems have been reviewed for it, and it will be an important part of our evaluation. But do you know why the market share for Campus, I assume you mean Canvas, has grown so large in recent years? The biggest reasons, I already mentioned, they were native cloud and intuitive design from the beginning. I would add some other things. They had a very unique culture, and people seemed to like working with them. So you got this virtuous cycle where customers were selling to customers. And so their culture, their cloud, their intuitive design were probably the biggest reasons why they had grown so much. And they did a good job of hitting what the market needed. Let's see, LMS means communicating with student needs, include messaging. Is this common across all platforms? It's interesting you mentioned communication. On the surface, the answer is yes, all systems have calendars, they do notifications, test alert, and they communicate with students. However, they do it in very different ways. And so one of the things is to look how they do their communication hubs and what are the special features of it, because it won't feel like a commodity where you're going to say, oh, they all communicate, so they're all the same, checkbox. This is much more of a, yes, they communicate. Let me see how you do it so you can understand it. And you'll find that some systems will be much more flexible than others on letting users select, do I want to be notified by email or text or by some other method? You'll find other systems that will be much better at giving faculty control to say, I want to communicate to students who have a 70 or less as of this grade, as of this point in the class, and automatically let me communicate with that subgroup of students. So the short answer is yes, it's common across all platforms. The longer answer is they do it a different way, and you really need to see which one matches what you guys need.
Thanks for that, Phil. Here's another question. Another couple.
Yeah. What data surveys do we have? We don't have good national surveys on this. We have a lot of anecdotal information we can share with you from working with a lot of schools. A lot of the schools we've worked with, we've done surveys that sort of answer these questions. Unfortunately, the nature of those surveys is they're private. So when we do surveys with you guys, it's going to be your data. We can't just take that and share it with other schools on that. So we can answer specific questions, but unfortunately, there's not a good source of nationwide surveys of the comparison you're looking at. Are we looking at usability for mobile, and does that include Android and Apple-based? The answer on that is yes. Mobile usage of the system is definitely part of what we want to look at, and that will not be limited to just Android or just Apple. We are looking at both of those. Oh, I'm sorry. Jen already answered that. I should read the answers before I say anything. The question about communication with Outlook, they tend to integrate with calendars for appointments, and it's not always the best integrations, so it's something you definitely need to look at. Outlook is not going to be as common, or it might not be as common as Google Mail, Gmail, and a Google Calendar type of integration. But the companies have improved their overall Office 365 integrations, and it's a fairly big difference on how well they do that. So that definitely should be looking at it. So yes, some of them do that with Outlook, and it will be a little bit different. Can original archive or export files? You almost look at it the other way. You guys own your data, and all systems are able to have tools to convert Learn Original courses into a new format. So technically, yes, you can get them into other systems, but that depends on the tools that each of these systems provide. So it would be Canvas tool to convert it from original into Canvas. It would D2L Brightspace to convert it into theirs, and Moodle, exact. So the tools are definitely out there. No, they do not work equally well. And the bigger question is, a lot of times you'll run into some faculty who will want their entire course to be converted automatically. Other people are going to say, hey, if I'm using a new system, I want to be able to fine tune it and take advantage of different features and modify things. So it's not a black and white when we talk conversion, but the answer to that is yes, there are tools for others, and no, they don't work equally well.
Thanks so much, Phil. We'll have another question and answer period at the end. So if there's more bubbling, see from Wayne, we'll pick that up at the end of the session. So Whit, I'll ask you to keep track of Wayne's question there. But just for the interest of time, we want to make sure that we move on to tell you a little bit about how you can get involved in the LMS review process. There's been a number of questions that have come up that said, are you looking for X? Are you looking for Y? And in fact, our question is, what are you looking for? We want to together define what our needs are as a Niagara College community. We have not set those. The CAE has not set those. ITS has not set those. We know that there are some, common areas, things like data security and privacy that absolutely we will have to look for. But we want you all to work with us to help us collectively set our priorities for our request for proposals. What is it that we are looking for as a community? And in order to do that, we need you to tell us about your experiences with our current learning management system, as well as what you hope for in a future learning management system. And we need you, because we know there's, close to 100 of you, but we need you to tell your colleagues and your students and your peers that we are looking for their input, and we will take their input very seriously and leverage that into an RFP that better reflects the needs of Niagara College. So my part of this presentation as we near the end is to tell you a little bit about how you can get involved in the Learning Management System review. And this is a really critical period for your involvement, October and November, because we are going to take everything you share with us and convert that into our request for proposals in December. So there are a few ways that you can help us, and you are going to begin to get emails about this tomorrow morning. But if you want to get ahead of the emails, you are welcome to use the QR code here on the screen or the link that I'm about to put in the chat through our LMS Review website. In our Get Involved page, you can access surveys. There is a unique survey for students, for staff, and for faculty to complete. Those surveys will be open. They are open currently, so beginning right now through to October 14th. And if you participate or complete those surveys, you will have a chance to win a number of prizes. For students, there's gift cards as high as $250, and then for staff, there are a number of $100 gift cards available. What I want to stress there is we ask a number of questions you already have been asking in the chat area. So Len, I think you asked a question about integrations and third-party tools. One of the questions we're asking about for our faculty is, what third-party tools are you currently integrating into your teaching? How important are those tools to you? How frequently do you use them? So again, we want to understand sort of the ecosystem and the use patterns of our community, and then that will help us to translate into the future selection process that we might make. All right. We have a student-focused survey that asks students very specific questions about their experiences. And for those of you who are staff, particularly for those of you who are thinking to yourself, I don't have a lot of connection with the learning management system right now. I don't have a lot to say about Blackboard, but I have some amazing ideas about how I could better make use of a learning management system if I had access to it. We ask you those questions as well. So you don't have to be a heavy Blackboard user to engage with the survey. You have an opportunity, even if you never use Blackboard in your day-to-day work, to tell us a little bit about how a learning management system could support the work that you're interested in doing. So these surveys are really for everyone, irrespective of your sort of use patterns to date. On the heels of our surveys, we are going to have many focus groups. More details are to come. We're just trying to sketch out what those look like, but there will be multiple opportunities for faculty, staff, and students in distinct focus groups to be able to engage with primarily Jeanette. So Jeanette from MindWires will be leading a number of focus groups, the majority of them. But also with myself, with Jen, with others, we want to make sure that anyone who wants to have a voice in this process will be able to have a voice. So you will see more details about opportunities to participate in 60 to 90-minute focus groups, where we will bring you together and really do some in-depth interviews about how you, again, currently use Blackboard and what you hope to see in an updated learning management system. Jeanette, I see you came on camera. Did you want to say anything about the focus group process?
Just that come with an open mind. You don't need to have any answers. It's just going to be a discussion. We're really trying to determine what you guys need. So it doesn't have, you don't have to be an expert in any of the LMSs, come with your opinions and your thoughts and your ideas, and we can gather them all and then be able to report out later.
Thanks, Jeanette. The other important piece of all of this, whether it's our surveys or our focus groups, is, we are interested in protecting your anonymity. All of the information we collect, we will report on in aggregate. So no one will ever be named specifically. So, we encourage you in all of those venues to really share what you're truly thinking, what your experience has been like. And again, we'll pull that all together in aggregate and take that forward in our decision-making process. As we've mentioned multiple times as well, we also have the LMS Review website. So on that website, there's an overview of the rationale for engaging in this review that Jen already shared with you. There's information about the process that we're undertaking, and I'll go through a little bit of that in just a couple of minutes, as well as our timelines. This is the place where any communications, anything that comes through Inside NC or our campus notices, all automatically get pulled onto the LMS website if they're dealing with the LMS review. So, if you want to keep up to date with what's happening, you can go and check it out there. We also have an area where you can provide questions or comments. So there is a contact form that's on the site. So if at any point, you have a question, a comment, you don't know who to reach out to, or perhaps you're chatting with a student who has a thought, you can invite them to go to the website, they can put it there, and we will get alerted to anything that comes through that portal and can either reach out to you or add a frequently asked question or something else to address the question that's been asked through the website. Now, this is looking forward, and we don't have a lot of specifics on what this looks like yet. We're just going to be sort of starting conversations on this. But you can anticipate, as we've mentioned, that there will be another opportunity to engage with this process. If not everyone, then select representatives from the Niagara College community in the winter term. We anticipate releasing the request for proposals in early January and having responses come in early February. At that point, we are going to have vendor demonstrations as well as sandbox testing opportunities. And so we'll be back to the community with more information about this, but you can anticipate these coming up in the winter term as well. So for a look at our process, August is done already, and that was where we initiated institutional conversations. We brought our steering and advisory teams together for the first time to begin to inform the process that you're encountering today. September, one of the key milestones is in fact this town hall meeting. We've been working towards this for quite a number of weeks now, and that kicks off our period of data collection and analysis. So surveys have launched today, as I mentioned, and focus groups will begin in mid-October and end in mid-November. So more details on that to come. With that information in hand, we will be able to draft a request for proposals in December and have that vetted by our steering and advisory teams, as well as our finance team and the folks in procurement. That RFP, we hope to distribute it in early January, as I mentioned. In February, the proposals should be received, and then we will begin with demos and sandboxes. Those will continue through March. And then ideally, by the end of April, we will select an updated LMS. And that, of course, will bring a period of transition to the institution. And so we are going to be starting to think about transitions now, even well before we've selected a particular vendor or a particular system. That said, we don't have any details carved in stone yet. So none of these items are associated with a specific timeline that you see here. But in general, we are going to then have to finalize contracts, negotiate and finalize those contracts. We will, of course, finalize a transition plan that will be vetted by our executive team at the college and resourced appropriately. We're then going to have to identify support resources for all of the various stakeholders in our institution, do training and orientation, likely engage in some kind of piloting period, and then a phased transition to our updated learning management system. And Patrick, I see your question there. It is definitely a major change management initiative. There will be some internal management that we will definitely be able to do and support. We also have the benefit of working with Mindwires, who is helping to advise us on a transition plan as well. But certainly, depending on the eventual vendor, I am sure that there will be opportunities to work with them, and there will be things that different vendors can offer to assist with that transition. So we'll be looking at some of those items and talking to vendors about the supports that they have in place. I know there's also external companies that support migration and transition as well. And that's something else that we will be exploring in the next little while. Awesome. That's the end of the formal presentation, but we did have some time remaining for any other questions. I know, Whit, there was a question from Wayne earlier that we didn't get around to, and there may have been others that I missed. If you have more questions, please feel free to add them to the chat as well. Whit, do you have mic access? Can you read back Wayne's question from earlier?
Yeah, absolutely. So Wayne was asking if most LMS platforms allow for in-house IT support and some customization, and are there package levels such as, for example, like a bronze, silver, or gold?
Yeah.
Thanks, Whit.
Yes, there are different levels of support that they offer. And, do you want to have weekend support? Do you want to have a consistent technology manager in charge? Do you want the vendor to provide help desk, or that you guys will provide your own help desk? So they will work with you, and there are different levels of support that they can offer within this.
Thanks, Phil. Patrick, I saw your question there as well, and Jen has touched on it. So in terms of student users and student engagement, we're very lucky. I saw that Sam Jemison, president of NCSAC, was joining us earlier. We've been in communication with the Student Administrative Council since, Jen, probably June of this year, and they very much support this process. They're assisting us with communications, amplifying messages, and engagement approaches using their social media networks. We have an NCSAC director who's joining us on our advisory team, Jake Forsyth, and we're very happy to have Jake join us. And as mentioned, we have student surveys going out. There is an open link available on the website, but direct emails will also go out to 2,000 of our students, and those emails will be sent out tomorrow. We are hoping to get a robust response from students so that we can really understand their use and their needs as well. Hey, Jake. Shout out to Jake. There you go. Awesome. Thanks, Sama. To pick up, knowing that Sama has joined the college fairly recently, you can't say new anymore, but there are a number of you I know who have experiences at other institutions and with other learning management systems. We welcome those perspectives as well. So feel free to let us know, or if you've been a part of a transition at another institution and you have some thoughts to share, we welcome that input too. Let's see, Whit, is there anything else I've missed here?
Not that I can tell, you've been on it.
Awesome. Anything else before we wrap things up this afternoon? That's a really good question, Gianluca. So Phil, Jeanette, we've talked about this, but at Niagara College, 40% of our learners and some programs more than that are international students who have joined us from, I think, over 100 countries. So the question Gianluca is asking is, are there data that indicates an LMS preference for international learners?
Again, this is more of capabilities. I don't think there's a simple answer on here's the preference, but it will get into very important things such as matriculated students. I mean, I think that most of your international students, if I understand, are treated the same as domestic, but how easy is it for them to register? Are they in the same place within your student information system? And how easy is it for the LMS to make sure that they're all involved? So there are capabilities, there are language preferences that get involved with international students. But no, I have not seen data that says international students taking classes in a North American market, which LMS do they prefer, other than specific college surveys. So as you guys do a survey, you'll collect some of that information yourselves, but there's not broad-based data.
Thanks, Phil. Jim, your question, is there demos? Are there demos of other LMS systems that we may look at? Again, there will be. So a few folks have said to me, well, I don't know what I don't know, right? How can I provide insight into what I want if I'm not entirely sure, I haven't seen the other systems? So the way our approach will work is that we're going to gather your input first. And then through the RFP process, qualified vendors will be invited, the ones who meet minimum qualifications, to provide things like vendor demos. So as soon as we have a line of sight on how we're going to coordinate that and who can participate, Jim will definitely let you know. But there will be vendor demos for the qualified proponents, for sure. Excellent. Well, Jen and myself, Jeanette and Phil, we can hang out for a little bit. We will stop the recording maybe at this point. So Nick, I'll invite you to stop the recording